These fashion accessories that we have to wear these days, they're a little bit of a nuisance. Not like earrings. Well, you have a lovely little graphic up there of Hercule Poirot, who is the Belgian detective invented by Agatha Christie, and most of you will be very surprised to learn that the first book with Poirot was written in 1916, during the First World War while she was living in England. It wasn't published until 1920, but she first wrote Poirot in 1916, and by the time she died in 1976, she had her last novel already. She was working on her last novel, and it was actually published posthumously. She was so tired of him. She hated him. He was pompous and arrogant. That's exactly how she made him. It's exactly the way she made him. He was a Catholic, a Belgian Catholic war refugee, the way she set him up. He was a detective in the Belgian police force, and then during the war, when the Germans invaded Belgium, he had to come to England, and that's where he meets Captain Hastings at the Styles Court, and they solve the mysterious affair at Styles, which was her first novel. You can see all of these stories, I mean literally the entire set of Poirot stories, acted out by David Suchet, produced by the BBC. They're all on YouTube. They're all out there for free. I watch them all the time. I was watching some yesterday, and I really appreciated your prelude. This is the theme song from the Poirot series. Poirot has been played by people from Charles Laughton all the way up to Kenneth Branagh. There have been many more versions of Murder on the Orient Express than anybody could ever want. And it's probably the most famous of the Poirot stories. And how many people here have never ever seen or read Murder on the Orient Express? Oh my God, a virgin. Or two or three. So I won't spoil the story. That's going to be hard. Okay. Well, here's the deal. It's one of those situations where Poirot, it's a locked room mystery, only it's a locked room with a dozen people, 13 suspects actually, locked in the same room, which is a train carriage stuck in a snowdrift in the middle of Europe. And Poirot has to solve the mystery because they're in one of those little countries where the police are corrupt. And the manager of the train says, if we leave it to them, they'll bother our customers, we'll get a terrible reputation, it will ruin our business. Please, please, please help us. Please solve it and give them the solution. And he does, but he doesn't give them a solution that he likes. He doesn't give them a solution that's quite accurate, because he has to weigh justice against justice. Now this is where we come to we're going to leave Poirot for a moment and come and talk about the scripture. Amos as a prophet is not much used. In fact, that let justice roll down like waters is pretty much the only quote from Amos most of us hear, any regular kind of thing. Thing is, it doesn't mean what we think it is. Amos was a furious, angry prophet. His entire book is full of, you people are just crappy and God's going to get you and the armies are going to come and destroy you. It's the whole book. I mean, seriously, all of Amos is like that. This one verse doesn't mean justice, flowing waters. It means, and I went and I checked the Hebrew, it means the flood of justice is going to hit you like water from heaven. It's going to be a big lump of water. It's going to destroy you. You earned this. Righteousness is going to be like the floodwaters that scrape you off the face of the earth. That's Amos. Notice how we keep moving it to mercy? Amos doesn't say much about mercy. Amos doesn't talk about mercy. He doesn't talk about chesed very much. Chesed is the Hebrew for loving kindness, mercy, the general idea that you can be nice about things from a justice perspective. Hesed is translated in so many different ways because it's a concept that exists in the Semitic tradition that doesn't actually exist in European languages. It isn't only being merciful in the sense of forgiveness. It isn't only being merciful in the sense of giving away your cloak or your stuff. It is taking into account all of the wrongs and all of the rights and balancing the two and deciding to do what is best for the person regardless. That's a very complicated notion of mercy. Sometimes it leans toward what we would call tough love, and sometimes it leans toward saying, okay, never mind, here, go on, I'm not going to bother you about this problem you made. It can be anywhere in between. It's a very complex concept. Amos doesn't care. He doesn't go there. He is not there. I checked this against the Septuagint as well, because about 200 years before the time of Jesus, a whole bunch of Hebrew scholars translated the Hebrew Bible into Greek, including Amos. And the Greek words that they use tell us a lot about what they thought the Hebrew was trying to say. And the Greek words, it's a swollen stream from winter snow melt, is what they're talking about. They're talking about a flood caused by all the snow in the mountains melting and just rushing down. And the word abatos that they use means undammed. So it's just, this is nice, this is not pleasant water. This is not pretty water. The Hebrew word, the word for justice, is mishpat, which comes from the word shapat, to judge, and it doesn't mean justice in the sense of what is right for everybody. It means judgment. It means the verdict. So let the verdict come down on you like water, like a big flood. And then the word that's translated righteousness is from tzadek or tzedakah, which means to make everything correct, to correct it, to erase the bad stuff and just correct all the mistakes. Amos is not being nice. But this is where we want to go. We go to St. Francis, we go to rivers of mercy. I think we should either agree that Amos is just an angry prophet and stop using him. His prophecies came true about 40 years later. It is a tradition among scholars to understand that prophecies are actually about the time in which they were written. They're not about later things. They're not really the future. They're about, this is what's going on right now that we need to address. When Amos was writing, they'd had 2 kings in a row with peace. They were not at war with anybody. They were doing fine, which means he was probably talking about political corruption within the system. He's talking about, y'all are just corrupt. Yeah, you're not at war with anybody, but, clean yourselves up. So that's kind of the guess for scholars. Anyway, so there's that part of it. Amos is not talking about the nice part. Well, here we come back to Poirot. In Poirot is often faced with the difficulty between justice and mercy. He's often faced with the choice between, okay, I've caught the bad guy. If he goes to trial, it will embarrass and destroy the lives of all of his family. I'm going to give him a chance to do the right thing and kill himself instead. This is very British, by the way. This is the very British sense of honor. Well, I'm not going to let myself besmirch my family name. I will take a gun out to go shooting rabbits and have a hunting accident instead. And this turns up in a lot of novels. Whether or not this was actually a common thing in England is a little bit debatable. Certainly it was a cultural recommendation. This is partly because of Christie's background. She was born in 1890, same year my grandfather was born. And she comes from a very Anglican family. They're a very devout Church of England. After her first marriage ended, her husband left her for another woman, and they got divorced. She wouldn't take communion again. She didn't take communion again for the rest of her life because she was a divorced woman, and she didn't feel that was right to do in church. She's that kind of devout. She makes Poirot a Catholic. Now, the Anglicans tended to make fun of the Catholics, and so Poirot is kind of a mockery of Catholicism. But his Catholicism keeps coming up. And there are places in the stories where he is really trying to struggle between what is the right thing to do here. Murder on the Orient Express is one of those. Some of the versions deal with that, and some do not. The David Suchet version that's free on YouTube really puts him in the place where he's struggling with his own faith. And the fact that if he turns over the answer that is convenient for everybody, that is merciful, and that acknowledges that the murdered man was in fact due for getting murdered. He was owed a death. He's always been on the side of the law. He's always been on the side of what is right. He is on the side of justice. He's always talking about justice. He wants justice for the victim. In this case, he's not sure that turning over the actual murderer is justice. And he has to struggle with that. And this is where we look at the possibility that justice in that case would be like a flood. It would scrape the lives of a whole bunch of people right off the face of the earth. It wouldn't bring back the dead. And in this particular case, the murdered victim was himself a murderer, so it wouldn't bring back his dead either. And so he chooses a kind of mercy. What this brings me to, and what I really wanted to talk about, and why Poirot is kind of a focus for me on this, is the question of, is justice the same thing as punishment? We talk about this a lot, and it's been in my mind this week, especially because the federal government has now indicted some of the people responsible for the death of Breonna Taylor, who's a young woman who was shot to death in her home, in her apartment, in her bed, because the warrant the no-knock warrant for her house was inappropriately created, and the police didn't give a crap, and her boyfriend, who woke up out of a sound sleep and pulled his gun and shot at these intruders in his house, got return fire, and that's what killed Miss Taylor, who was a perfectly lovely young woman. Now, people call for justice. I think the people who are responsible for her death need to be held accountable. People call for justice. They call for accountability. Is accountability the same thing as punishment? What counts as punishment for these people? Do we want their deaths? I can't myself go there. I'm not a capital punishment person. I don't think it does us any good. I think it's expensive and morally suspect and doesn't actually do anything except keep that one person from committing crimes again. And 9 times out of 10, when we execute people who are never going to kill anybody else again anyway. They killed one person because it was a personal issue, and then we wind up putting them in jail for 15 years while we argue about it, and then we kill them badly, and I don't see that it gets us any further. I don't think it does anything to deal with the pain or the damage done by the death in the first place. The system doesn't make sense in my head. But I listen to these calls for justice. I listen to these calls for accountability, and I don't know what they mean. Because this is a nice, vague term. Does it mean we need to punish people? What does punishment look like? Does putting someone in jail for this make it better, make it right, do anything different? So I am a proponent of what's called restorative justice, which is you look at the situation and say, what can be done to make it better? This is why for Juneteenth I preached reparation. This is why when I think of the Tulsa massacre, I think in terms of how do we rebuild Tulsa, rebuild the black community in Tulsa, reinvigorate the community that was destroyed, because that is how you repair. And that is what I heard John Hope Franklin say when I heard him speak at the first service of reconciliation up in Tulsa in 1998, so a million years ago. What I think Poirot does in Murder on the Orient Express is a form of restorative justice. It's a difficult choice because he's been trained in what's called retributive justice, where what you do is you take an eye for an eye, or a hand for a hand, or a beating for a beating. Our system of justice in this country is built on retribution. Now, there was a time, historically, when we believed, and this comes actually in some places out of France and Belgium and the whole French-speaking area, that putting people in prison was such a horrible thing to do. Isolating human beings from other human beings was such a horrible thing to do that people would do anything to avoid it, including behave themselves. This is, have you tried this with teenagers? It doesn't work. I'm going to make you go to your room. I'm going to ground you. Does it keep teenagers from being teenagers? No. Does it keep people from being people? No. Does it keep us from behaving badly when we're in that place and time? No. But yeah, we believed for a long time in this. In the late 1600s, early 1700s, the Quakers in Pennsylvania began to work on a form of imprisonment that was supposed to be about rehabilitation. And that started with reading scripture to inmates. So there's a strong Christian footprint on this. I work in the prison system. I've been volunteering in the Oklahoma prison system for over 20 years. I visited some men at Granite a couple weeks ago. I got lost on the way to Granite. It's a 2.5-hour drive from Norman anyway, and it took me over 3 hours to get there. And I told them I got lost on my way here, and they looked at me and laughed and said, "That's how we got here too." I love this. I love working with inmates because they have no illusions. They're pretty damn earthy. They're pretty damn grounded. They are where they are. They know what they're dealing with. These guys are going to be in for a long time. You're not at Granite for a short stay. And I can't help thinking that we may be safer with those guys in there. I don't know. But they're not becoming better people in there without people from the outside coming in and making them better. So I'm doing my bit for restorative justice by doing that. I come back to this idea that the detective story in our history is a set of stories. It was invented, by the way, by Edgar Allan Poe. I think it's the Purloined Letter is one of the first ones, and there are a couple of others. But he's the one who invents the idea of the detective as the hero solving the murder or solving the crime. And we like these stories, and they become immensely popular very quickly because they give us a sense of balance. They're like superhero stories. In fact, they are superhero stories. They are stories where there is this horrible mess, this horrible injustice, this horrible thing, and this hero comes along and with special powers of observation or thought or whatever, Sherlock Holmes is certainly a superhero, solves the crime and makes all right again. Like that flood that just comes through. Like most stories, they're fantasies. It don't work that way. It can take detectives years to find the people they're looking for. Sometimes they give up. We don't always give them enough money. Private detectives are more often in the way than helpful. The private detective who actually solves the crime is rare. It's usually good old slogging police work that does it. And the police are wrong sometimes. And they're short-sighted sometimes. And they're biased pretty much all the time because they're human beings. And they're going to be biased. These stories are like a promise that somehow things can be made right, that insurmountable odds can be surmounted, that injustices can be rectified. But in the real world, we don't get the river. We don't get the thing that scrapes everybody away and leaves only the good people behind. You know, Noah and the family, that flood relationship is very much part of Amos. It's part of what he's talking about. No. We got to try and rebuild. When nastiness happens, when injustice happens, we have to try and figure it out, fix it, repair it. And that is where chesed comes in. That is where mercy comes in. Because that's what mercy really is. It's about figuring out what will best repair the damage. The damage to the person, the damage to the soul, the damage to the community, the damage to the world. What will best repair the damage? There are places in the Poirot stories where he steps back and says, I will do this because this will repair the damage. One of my very, very favorite ones, I watched this last night, is called The Wasp's Nest. It's a little short story, a little tiny short story. His old friend is engaged to this girl, and he goes down to visit his old friend, and there's this wasp's nest in the tree nearby, and it's annoying everybody, and somehow it's not getting, he can't get rid of the wasps. They tried gasoline on it, petrol, and it didn't seem to work. Well, the guy who's helping him do that is an old friend of the girlfriend, and eventually what Poirot figures out is that there's a whole plot going on here. And so he intervenes and he steps in and he prevents the murder. In this one story, he prevents the murder because the guy with the girlfriend knew his girlfriend was leaving him for the other man and was going to set the other man up as his murderer. and then kill himself, so that the other guy would go to jail and be hung. In England, hanging is a thing. It was until very recently. Now they don't do capital punishment anymore, but when they did, they hung people. And so he was going to set it up so that his girlfriend's boyfriend would get hung. And Poirot steps in and stops him. At the end of the story, the reason he was doing this is because he's got a terminal illness. He's just discovered he doesn't have that much longer to live anyway. So he has nothing to live for now. He's dying of this disease. His girlfriend's leaving him. What the hell? Let's take this guy out with him. He's in a crappy mood. And Poirot steps in and prevents him. And at the end of the story, what he says to Poirot is, "Thank God you stopped me." Because that restored the balance. That's restorative. That's mercy. It's one of the best short stories out there, and very few people know it or read it. I think it's one of the most underappreciated of Agatha Christie stories. So I recommend it to you, The Wasp's Nest. It's also in the David Suchet on YouTube. Go find it. But this is the thing. Detective stories, we tend to think about how they're going to save the day and send the bad guy off to jail, and then we don't think about what happens next. And what Amos is telling us is that because we are always a little bit corrupt, we're human beings. Just like Agatha Christie made Poirot into a smart-ass, pompous, fussy little Belgian with a giant mustache who's always terribly tidily dressed and very picky. He is so OCD, it's unbelievable. He will not live any place that doesn't have square corners. If he moves into an apartment and it doesn't have square corners, he gets very annoyed with the builder and he moves. His furniture must have square corners. He's very OCD. Really annoying. I completely understand why she didn't like him. But she made him that way. God made us this way. God probably gets pissed at us at times. But we are exactly the way we were made to be. Which means we really do have at times to take a look past the superhero, past the detective, past the moment of, yay, we got the bad guy, and look at the next step. A lot has been made of the fact that when the second in command of Al-Qaeda was assassinated last week, they used this really special drone. It probably was horrendously awful for his family to find him dead in pieces on the balcony. But because they used the kind of drone they did, they only killed the one person. We, this government, our people, took great care that even the people who supported and fed and clothed and took care of this guy, who had killed hundreds of thousands of people around the world, nobody else was hurt. The building wasn't damaged. We took great care to be precise about that. That is a step forward. I think it's a step forward in a weird direction, but it's a step forward. We don't want collateral damage. When Poirot decides in Murder on the Orient Express to be merciful, that's what he's avoiding. He doesn't want the flood to come through and scrape everything away. He will target the one thing that can be done. So justice, mercy, do what can be done to restore the balance, because that's what we are called to do. Do no more. And when you find yourself dealing with anger and rage because someone you love has been hurt and you want to get those people, remember, what will happen next? Amen. Jesus was getting ready to face retribution. He was sitting with his friends at the table, and they were having the ritual meal for the holiday. And he was very aware that his fit of pique at the temple earlier in the week was drawing attention to him, that perhaps was not going to be healthy. And he knew he was facing the retribution of the temple and the retribution of the Romans, and he knew it wasn't going to turn out so good. So he says to his friends, this is now on you. It's your job. It's your life. It's your future. You go out into the world. and you teach what I've taught you. Read the law with a lens of kindness. Read the law with a lens of mercy. Recognize that justice as punishment isn't always justice for the world. It may feel good in the moment, but it's not. The long-term consequences are not always good. He said, I want you to do this to remember it. I want you, every time you break bread, to think about the fact that this embodies all of life, and it brings us all together as one family. This is my body. This is your body. This is our body. This sustains us and keeps our bodies alive. This is our family. Share this, and when you share it, remember me. And then he took the cup, and in that particular meal, they do all kinds of things with blessings of cups all through the meal. And he blessed it one more time and said, this blood of the earth, this juice that flows through all of us, this is what makes us kin. This is our shared blood. Think of this as what makes us family. Remember what I have taught you. Go forth, and guess what? You do this every day. You eat and drink every day. Remember me every day. Remember the teachings every day. Remember that justice is mercy, and mercy is justice. And either one alone is a little difficult. And so now here we find ourselves, 2,000 years later, with our little plastic thingies with the juice and the bread, and we are going to do the same thing. So we take the body and remember that this sustains us and makes us community. And we drink the juice and remember those same things. I usually say, this is God's table and I'm your waiter today. This is God's table. This table welcomes everyone in this room. It welcomes everyone outside of this room. It welcomes everyone in God's creation. It is not about what you believe or what you think. It is about being a creature of God. To build the city of God, we must include everyone. Anyone we leave outside the walls will have to break in order to survive. So let us build a city of God that includes everyone. That is not an easy task.